When you start looking at your life from the outside, you start having this sort of, wow, maybe that wasn't me. Maybe there's nothing actually wrong with me.
So we're here with Gail Hardman-Woung, and she is a licensed clinical social worker, also known as a therapist, and specializes in EMDR, lifespan integration, and neurofeedback, all which work really well. I've done them all myself. And we were wondering if you could tell us a little bit about those therapies, those modalities.
Oh, sure. Well, let me back up a little bit and talk about how we get some of our negative cognitions.
Oh, yes, please.
Yes, tell us all about that.
Because that's what we're really treating. So let me think. As an example, and I share this a lot with people at the clinic, a couple summers ago, I drive up to a red light and I look over to the right, and there's this man, and he's screaming and raging, and he's got a pulsing vein in his forehead.
Oh my
and
gosh.
he's just spewing toxins on a bush.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, thank God it's a bush, right?
Yeah.
Because whatever was on the receiving end of that, it's going to naturally impart to them, there's something wrong with me. I did something wrong. I'm in danger. I'm shameful. I'm a bad person, right? That's going to naturally be imparted. Now, from the outside, we can look and see very easily which one's shameful. Which one is there something wrong with?
Crazy man, not the
right.
poor bush.
Which one should have done something differently, right? So, but if you're raised with that kind of thing, those negative cognitions will naturally be imparted to you. Similarly, if you just have a very distracted parent, what's going to be imparted is, I'm not important.
Not worth it.
Not valued.
I'm not valued. So those are some of the right-brained issues that we struggle with. And we talked about this briefly before we started. But so we have an emotional brain, which is where our injury is. Now, when we talk logically, we all pretty much know it was him.
Yeah.
But if that happens to us, when we look at our childhood, because we were on the receiving end, we actually believe that stuff.
Right.
Right.
So emotional brain and logical brain.
Right. And it's not that simple, but for the most part, yeah, people come in with these negative thoughts imparted to them, usually in their childhood, by accident in many cases.
Yeah.
Right. Nobody
Right?
means to do that
Nobody
to their
means
child.
to do that to their child. But, that's where we pick it up.
Yeah.
So the protocols that we use, and 7 of the adults at my clinic are adoptive parents with 22 adopted children. Wow. So anyway, over the years, 15 years of private practice, I was just searching for what works, right? And what doesn't work. And that's what you learn in grad school, what doesn't work. No.
Yes. Yep.
So anyway, lifespan integration is a way to kind of externalize that narrative and look at your life from the outside. And it's the fastest way I'm aware of to build self-empathy and self-compassion.
Yeah.
Because when you start looking at your life from the outside, you start having this sort of, wow, maybe that wasn't me. Maybe there's nothing actually wrong with me. Maybe I was a precious little 4-year-old girl with a mom who drank too much.
Yeah.
Right? So as we heal the emotional brain, right, the left brain knew the truth all along anyway, but you just couldn't register it. So it's kind of an integration. Because if we were to even ask, well, I'll just give another example. So because I've specialized in adoption for a long time, I once worked with a girl from China, and I said, well, what feels most true when you think about your birth mom? And she said, I should have stopped her from leaving me. And I said, well, how old were you? And she said, 2 days old. And I said, you think you should have stopped her from leaving you? And she said, no, I don't think it. That's ridiculous. I feel it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So lifespan integration is a great protocol for building self-empathy and self-compassion. Then we use EMDR to kind of clean up what's left over, because we usually, have some hot spots. A lot of people, middle school is a hot spot for them.
Yes.
Right?
And Gail, what's
Yeah.
EMDR stand for?
It's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
And how do you explain to people what that
Yeah,
it
does?
is. Well, that's why we do LI first, because it is like the big no fun protocol.
Right.
You're literally saying, think about your mom. What feels most true? I'm not important, right?
Yeah.
Where do you feel that in your body? Right here. And what's the emotion? Fear or whatever. So then you put a headset on them that beeps bilaterally, and then tappers that tap bilaterally, and then there's a light bar that goes back and forth. So you're going to stimulate the left or the right brain and the left brain that while you're telling yourself.
You're
and
thinking the emotion.
Yes. When I look at someone and say, okay, now I want you to think about your mom, tell yourself I'm not important, and feel that fear in your throat. They look at me like, what are you saying?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, who comes back for this?
Right, exactly.
So hard.
Exactly. And that's, again, why we try to do the LI first always, because EMDR just goes so much faster.
Yeah. But then
If they do the LI.
when they're saying the really difficult thing and feeling, would you say that their brain bounces out of that and into something else?
That's exactly what happens. When you start telling yourself, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with me, and you start remembering, because you're going to remember every instance in your life in which that's felt true. But at some point, you're going to come to that 4-year-old and you're going to go, wait a second. And people will say their mind starts arguing with them.
Yeah.
And then eventually, logic always wins with the EMDR. Because
Yeah.
it's an irrational thought. And when your logical brain makes sense of this irrational thought, it just seems silly. And rarely does it bother them again. Unless it's a child, because we do their trauma work at each developmental stage. Because it looks different to them.
Right. So
Yeah.
what are people's common self-limiting beliefs?
I'm not good enough. I'm insignificant. There's something wrong with me.
I'm not in control.
Well, if they've been raised in an environment where they've been powerless, it's usually I'm powerless, I'm not in control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then one of your favorite things to say is whatever is historical
Hysterical.
is hysterical.
Right. So if it's hysterical, it's historical. Because if for me, I have a negative cognition that is, I'm not good enough, right? And someone treats me as though I'm insignificant, that one might not land because it's not in there.
Right.
But if they treat me like I'm not good enough, that's going to really bother me.
Yes.
Similarly,
That's something that is in there.
right? If I have shame, if I were raised by shameful parents, and someone attempts to shame me, that's going to trigger me, right? So with the protocols we use, we're removing the triggers. We're not teaching people how to cope with their triggers, right? When you have self-empathy and self-compassion, when you can logically see the story from the outside, you don't need the coping
Associate
skills.
yourself with those feelings
Yeah.
as much.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Does anybody actually heal all the way, or is this something that people work on for a long time?
It depends.
Yeah.
I would say an average person, probably 3 to 6 months and the work is done.
Yeah.
But people have, some people have unbelievable trauma, just, starting at a very young age, and they're very dissociated, and it takes a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are often familiar with EMDR for things like helping with fears, definitely trauma, but things like I had a patient say to me, "Oh, EMDR, it's used for helping you get over your anxiety around flying or things like that."
Yep, absolutely.
So it sort of runs the gamut, yes?
It does,
trauma.
but flying is not about flying.
Right. Right.
Flying can be about mom.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Flying can be about dad. It's
Will you
gonna
give
be
us a flying
powerlessness.
example about mom and dad, a
Well,
case study?
you're gonna bump right back into I'm not in control.
Yeah.
I'm not in control. I'm powerless usually.
Right.
And so usually you have to. I mean, I worked with a girl a long time ago. It was about flying, and then it was about being a student in another country in an unsafe living situation and calling her mom for help, and mom being as dismissive as she usually was.
Wow.
So it was interesting where it goes because you're following it down to kind of its origins often.
Yeah.
Gail, you've spoken before about the difference between learning coping mechanisms or coping techniques versus the impact of doing something like neurofeedback and EMDR, where you're really addressing triggers.
Right.
Can you speak to that a little bit about which is more effective and why?
Well, again, everything is depends on the person. So if you've never done any trauma work, you may need a compassionate witness, right? You need to tell someone your story. You need someone to say, that's not okay. But if you've already done that and you still have triggers, then you want to move towards some of the right brain protocols to kind of clean it out. And then again, because we have 22 adopted kids by the adults in our clinic, the neurofeedback is about getting at the body memory, because what they can't even remember. And we also have a very cool thing called the Safe and Sound Protocol that calms the vagus nerve. And so Stephen Porges, it's kind of the culmination of his 30 years of trauma work. And so it's a headset that you do for 5 days, and it's got a tinny sounding music that gets louder and more quiet, but it's actually exercising the middle ear muscle that's connected to the vagus nerve that calms the organs in your body and affects your fight or flight response.
Yeah.
So that's a cool thing too.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is when you sit down with somebody, do you feel like anybody's not messing their kids up? Like from perfectionism
Well, I mean, everybody, a little bit. I think as long as you are kind and strong, your kids are going to be okay.
Yeah.
As long as you're not screaming, as long as, when you make a mistake, you apologize.
Yeah.
It's funny because I have a 20-year-old birth child, and I remember the moment. And I mean, that kid, when he was 15, he wore a size 15 shoe. He's just always been this huge kid, right? So I remember when he dropped, a quarter of a gallon of milk on his foot. And I remember going, oh, you're fine. And then 4 years later, he brings it up. And I think what was going on was his older sister was kicking up her heels. I was probably working too much, who knows what, but I was definitely dismissive in that moment. And so, I just recommend to parents just apologize.
Yeah.
Just see them
Own
and
it.
hear them.
Like when he brought that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was funny because usually you wouldn't remember something like that, but I think it must have been the look in his face or something when I was like, oh, you're fine. What are you complaining? It's like this much milk. But I kind of belittled him and shamed him and, on accident. But just own it and apologize.
Yeah. What about this perfectionist parent thing that goes on? What does that do to their children?
I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Because that's actually the roots of perfectionism on ourselves.
Yes.
Is I'm not good enough. I have to work harder and do it better because there's a small voice deep inside of me that says I'm not good enough.
Well, and I think historically a lot of parents, maybe decades back, felt like they had to keep it all together and not show themselves. Pretending like everything's fine, not talking about things that are real. And so I think that, people now are saying, wait, am I supposed to show my kids how I really feel and what's really going on and my vulnerabilities? And I think that helps people so much more than when parents were keeping it all together and not showing their kids anything and shoving it all under the rug.
Absolutely. The other thing is, parents always fought alone, away from the kids. Except the arguments started in front of the kids usually.
Yeah, so they didn't.
But the kids never see the repair.
Yeah.
So when parents have an argument, don't just disappear with it. Make sure that your kids understand the repair and how that happened as well.
Yes.
Because again, they're learning how to navigate relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. So perfectionism is funny. I mean, so when we talk about perfectionism, we talk about perfectionism, procrastination, and paralysis. Because they
talk
go
more about
together.
that.
They go together. Well, also perfectionism and chaos go together, right? Because if
a
you
need to
have to
control.
be perfect, right? I mean, think about the ridiculous, well, anything in extreme really, but I'm thinking about the diets, where they ping pong back and end up heavier than they started.
Yeah.
Because you're starving yourself, right? Perfectionism begs for chaos. So perfectionism, I mean, to do things well is one thing, but when you're a true perfectionist, you can get locked up. You just can't move forward on something because if you can't do it perfectly, there's no point in starting.
Yeah. Paralysis.
Paralysis.
Yeah, that's so good. So you talk to parents a lot about this repair and practice. Can you tell us about that? I'm
Certainly.
sure our audience would love to hear about
Certainly. And actually, this is, it would be great because I do a lot of this and I'm moving away from direct practice. So it's just a gift, okay?
that. That's so nice.
Right. So traditional parenting goes something like this. David, get a shower. Lazy parenting, I'm on the computer. David, get a shower. Damn it, David, there's no time for your shower. Let's just go, right?
Yeah.
So what we teach as therapeutic parenting is looking at through the lens of what does this child need to learn, okay? So then when you're at peace, after work, when you have a cup of tea, you can say, David, before you do the fun thing that you asked to do, I just noticed that you're having a hard time taking a shower in the morning. So why don't we just practice? I'm going to say, David, take a shower. And you're going to say, sure, and go take a shower. We're just going to practice that because then we're always nice. We're on their side. I want you to have the fun thing that you want. I just noticed you need practice in this one area.
Yeah, that's so good.
So, you may have a troublesome practice period or 2 or 3 because that David may drag himself up the stairs and roll around on the landing saying, you're so mean.
Yeah.
And then make a few more steps and then get to the top and roll around on the floor
Every parent
again.
is like, yes.
Yes. And then finally get into the bathroom, right? And then you call them back and say, you know what? Here's the practice and praise part. That first part was really good. You had a little trouble on the landing. The other part was really well. And then you had trouble at the top. Can we try that again? Right? Because we're so nice.
So nice.
Right.
All the
Calm
time.
and strong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the fun thing is, and there was I think it was summer before last, there was this girls rock event and there was 2 girls being naughty out kind of on the floor in front of everybody. And one of the moms walked up and whispered something into one of the little girl's ears and her behavior just straightened up. And the other mom made a beeline for that mom and said, what did you say? And she gave her my phone number. And all she said was, honey, are you going to need to practice keeping your body and your mouth still later?
They don't want to practice.
Oh, wow.
Nope.
They
No.
don't want to practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I give that tool to people, I tell them because when I grew up, we had 5 kids 5 years apart in my family, right? One was adopted. I was in the middle. And when we went to the store, we'd have to hold like onto my mom's skirt or the cart or something like that. And when we misbehaved, she would show us the wooden spoon in her purse. So your
funny.
practice and praise is sort of that sweet, kind, you know.
Yes, maybe if
Yeah, honey, is this something you're going to have to practice later? And they just go, no, I don't really like that practice thing. That's not very fun. Because kids learn through experiences. They're never going to learn with you just barking at them.
Yes.
And a powerless parent ends up shaming and barking and angry and all of that good stuff.
yeah. So a lot of it is just reminding parents to stay calm and kind.
Well, and it's giving them the tools they need. Because when you're feeling powerless, when you cannot get them to do what you're asking them to do,
Yeah.
it's frustrating.
Well, and you're so far away from that childhood experience as an adult. So looking through the lens of the child and saying, oh, kids need to learn through experiences. I mean, that's a great reminder for parents because adults learn through lots of different ways, right? They learn through observation, they learn from commands or, instruction, and that's not necessarily what kids are going to respond to. That makes a lot of sense, right? They have to experience.
Yeah. So practice, if they're slamming their door over and over again, we're like, sweetie, why don't we come practice shutting the door softly?
Perfect.
Come practice. We're just going to practice shutting the door.
Absolutely.
And they're huffing
Gently,
and puffing.
lightly.
But
Well, and here's the other thing. It's nice if you wait until they want something because you have no power until they want to. They're going to say, no, thank you. But if you say, and here's where it gets a little bit tricky now. Okay, it's a little devious. If you know that your child has a repair to make or a practice session that she needs to do, and she doesn't really want to do it, and we're so nice, we don't get into knockdown dragouts with our kids. We just don't, right? But you could call the neighbor and say, hey, can you invite Sally over to play with your daughter this afternoon because I need her room clean? And she was rude to her little brother, so she needs to read him a book.
yes. So then your daughter comes to you and says, like, can I go to the neighbors?
And you say, sure, sweetheart.
Of course you can.
Absolutely. I want you to go there.
As
In
soon
fact, I'll
as
send
you-
some cookies with you. Because
So nice.
we're so nice.
As soon as you practice shutting the door. why don't we
As
go
soon as you
upstairs?
get your bedroom clean and you read your little brother a book, I'm happy to let you go.
Yeah. So the repair part
Right.
is different than the practice part.
Well, when they get older, you can use the repair part. It's mainly we're looking through the lens of what does this child need to learn,
Yeah.
right? What does this child needs to learn to be respectful and kind.
Yeah, they were
You know.
mean to their little brother or
Absolutely.
sister, and so now you need to show them love by reading them a book before you can go to the
And
neighbor's
traditional
house.
parenting is you can't touch the cat, you pulled its tail. Right?
There's no repair.
The repairs are shame reducing for the kid. They don't walk around thinking, oh, I'm a bad kid who can't touch the cat because I pulled his tail. They made a repair to the cat. They feel good about themselves. Repairs are shame reducing.
Oh, that's so sweet. Yeah.
Right.
So give the cat some love.
Absolutely.
Let's see how the cat would like you to behave with them and like what you can offer the cat.
Right.
Yeah. That's really sweet.
Yeah.
And what about kids who are kicking and screaming saying, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to repair. I'm not going to practice. They just
Well, you don't ask them to in those moments. You
In the
wait.
heightened
you
emotion?
have no, when they're out of their mind, when they are in their dysregulated emotional brain, we're kind and loving and shut up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because we don't even have our precious child there.
Yeah.
We have, a kid who's in an emotional temper tantrum. You're not going to get anything done. You're not going to get anything accomplished. What you're going to do is you're going to egg them on, right? And the situation's going to escalate.
Right.
But that same child, after a nap and a sandwich or something, and when they say, because they want something all day long, I mean, how many times a day do our kids want something, right?
all day long.
All day long. So you could say, well, sure, sweetheart. Of course. I want you to have it.
Yeah.
But I noticed you had a hard time coming when I called today. So you go to the front. I did this with my grandkids almost every other weekend. I noticed because they get used to not listening, right?
Right.
So I want you to go to the front door and touch it so I know you're there. Put a little knock on it. And I'm going to say come. And then you come. And we'll try that a few times. And when I'm sure you can come, then you can go out in the backyard again.
Practice and repair.
For the kid who won't get off their bike, you say, sure, you can ride your bike, but let's just practice getting off it and coming to me a few times first. Kids learn through experiences.
Yeah. That's so great. So what about, so many people talk to us about their relationships with like family members or friends and these people in their lives that they just can't resolve the issue with. How do you work with those people?
Well, ideally, cutoffs aren't healthy. They're not, unless the person is truly unsafe. But when you do your trauma work, and when I was doing more private practice, I would say our goal is that your mom has the same power over you as that little chair does.
Yep, that makes sense.
And, with those protocols, you can get there. In fact, I've had a couple psychologists. One, she said, I've been working on my mom's issues for 10 years. I have a hard time even really thinking about her now. Just doesn't even bother me.
So if you work on yourself, then the power and control that person has over you goes away.
As you get into your logical brain about them, another lady called me, and her mother was truly unsafe for her and her children to be around. So she had finished up her treatment, 6 months before, and she called me and said, my mom just called me. She wanted to come for the holidays. And I said, you know what? You've never liked me, and I don't like you either. Let's just forget this forever. Right?
Yeah, sometimes it's necessary.
If it's an unsafe parent, if that parent is truly unsafe for you and your child to be around.
Yeah.
You mentioned cutoffs aren't healthy. And right now it's very popular in culture. They call it the cancel culture, where people just cut things out of their life or cancel things and just walk away and just put up the strong hand.
Ghost you, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
What is not healthy about the cutoff or a cancel culture? How do you put that into words? Because that's a very popular sentiment right now.
Well, I think our goal for our children and for everybody is to have the capacity for an intimate, loving relationship. So navigating difficult relationships is part of that, right? Because sometimes there's just pain on both sides and they're misunderstood. So being able to, navigate a tough relationship, versus quitting a job, quitting another job, having, 6 partners in 2 years, it's just easier to try to figure out, what am I doing that's part of the problem?
Owning your part of it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Looking at our own stuff. It's hard to do, but.
And there's always going to be difficult people, and relationships in general are complicated. They do get sticky. And so figuring out how to be within it rather than go, and I remember you saying one time, trading one set of circumstances for another set of circumstances, right?
Right.
Like, everybody has problems with their spouse once in a while, but and some people do need to be divorced, but does everybody need to be divorced? Because if you go and find somebody else, there's going to be problems with that person too. It's just going to be different problems. Right?
Absolutely.
Especially if you're not working on
Your
the
own
inner
stuff.
stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So at the end of the day, a lot of this is about making sure we are in the right space, whether we're parenting or in a relationship with our family or friends, making sure that we've done the inner work and that we're staying calm and owning our behavior around it.
When you look through the lens of everybody gets their stuff honestly, if you put 1,000 precious baby boys born in that family, in that birth order, and then you look 30 years forward, you're going to have 1,000 30-year-old men struggling with basically the same stuff.
Yeah. Everyone gets their stuff honestly.
So if everybody gets their stuff honestly, it's really hard to be judgmental. It's really hard not to see, even at the checkout, you see people organizing their stuff, and my heart weeps for them because, they are so struggling with I'm not good enough, I have no control, I'm powerless, that they're taking a lot of energy, to have power over how their groceries are on the belt.
And they got that stuff honestly.
But how would you like to live as that person?
Yeah. That's a lot of grace.
The slightest thing goes out of your way and you're going to get ruffled.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. It's so good, Gail. Everybody needs to hear this.
And, you know, it's almost like you're taking your ego out of the way when you're looking at somebody else through that lens, right? I mean, saying that person came by
absolutely.
honestly.
Well, and the other thing I talk a lot about is mental health is I'm a dumbass and you're a dumbass and we're just trying to make it around the space on the planet. Right?
Yes.
Because
Hallelujah.
We're all messing up.
we're all messing up all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yes, Gail. Yes, that is true. I say that all the time. We're all just humans. We have a lot of stuff going on. Some of it's good, some of it's bad.
We're
and
gonna drop
doing
the
our
ball.
best.
Yeah.
And some of
Yep.
it's really crappy.
Yep.
Even if I'm doing my best, it might be terrible.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so owning our stuff, saying we're
Absolutely.
sorry, those two things go a long way. And then trying to do it better next time.
Right.
Yeah.
And it helps if you remember that the more mature person apologizes first.
Aha. Yeah, that's so good. It's so good.
Then it's a race, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Who's going to
Yes.
apologize first? I'm more mature.
Right.
Yes. Yes. So good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us. It's been so fun talking to you. You have so much to offer everybody.
Yes. Gail, everybody
was my
needs a little
pleasure.
more of you
Yes.
in their life.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.